Hi everyone, I'm John and thanks for joining me here in the Boneyard. There has been a lot in the press recently about Bernardo Bertolucci's Last Tango in Paris, as a movie called Being Maria is being released starring actress Anna Maria Bartolomei as 19-year-old actress Maria Schneider. And the film discusses the creation of the controversial making of, lawsuits and critical reception that followed the release of Last Tango in Paris, and the unfortunate and personal tragedy and effect that Schneider said the film had on her own life, and especially a scene of SA that takes place in the film where she felt she had been forced into an incredibly uncomfortable and humiliating situation from these two older, powerful and established men.
You afraid?
No.
No? You're always afraid.
And was in no situation to refuse participation in the scene, one that she said she did not want to film and had been sprung upon her.
No? What are you afraid of?
You're really sick.
Perfetto. That's great. We finish the light and we shoot.
After Maria Schneider's death, Bertolucci himself spoke out about the incident in a clip that went viral across the web.
We didn't tell her. There was this detail of the butter used as a lubricant. But I feel guilty. I feel guilty, but I do not regret. I didn't want Maria to act her humiliation, her rage. I wanted Maria to feel, not to act, the rage and the humiliation. Then she hated me for all life.
Schneider was very young at the time and received no support from anyone when the critical backlash and court cases began to be hurled at the filmmakers for breaking obscenity laws because of the extreme erotic content of the movie. And while Brando and Bertolucci were established stars and could handle the backlash to some extent, Schneider had nowhere to turn and said that she became the main target for anyone who was against the film because she did not have the power or career status of Bertolucci or Brando. She also said that it was not her doing because she did not write or direct the scenes, and that it was in the creative hands of these other two artists.
Bertolucci, Brando et moi, on est condamnés.
Condamné à quoi?
À 2 mois de prison avec sursis. Pour obscénité.
Enfin, tu vas pas aller en prison.
C'est pas le problème. J'ai pas écrit ce scénario. J'ai pas réalisé ce film. Je suis pas responsable de tout ça, moi.
And when it came to the point where all three of them may receive prison sentences, the young woman was outraged as she felt that it was not her doing. Schneider said on that notorious scene,
"They only told me about it before we had to film the scene, and I was so angry. I should have called my agent or had my lawyer come to the set, because you can't force someone to do something that isn't in the script. But at that time, I didn't know that. Marlon said to me, 'Maria, don't worry, it's just a movie.' But during that scene, even though what Marlon was doing wasn't real, I was crying real tears. I felt humiliated, and to be honest, I felt a little both by Marlon and by Bertolucci. After that scene, Marlon didn't console me or apologize. Thankfully, there was just one take."
I just thought I should mention this controversy because it is an important issue and filming wasn't like today, where we have intimacy coordinators on set to help create such scenes in a safe, artistic environment. And this notorious scandal, press coverage and eventual court rulings have become a part of not just Last Tango's legacy, but also the wider discussion of personal safety and mental health issues that can arise as a result of any artist's interpretation of harrowing events. But as we will get into in this video, that dark cloud that hangs over Last Tango is not part of what I personally took from this classic work of cinema when I originally saw it as a young film fan.
You act like a free woman. But in fact, you're just a little girl. A little girl with lots of principles.
I'm also eager to see Being Maria the movie, as it stars Matt Dillon in a supporting role, playing legendary actor Marlon Brando, and I've been a fan of Dillon my whole life.
Coupé, formidable. Bene.
Bravo, petite sardine.
From his astonishingly fantastic roles as a young actor in movies such as Francis Ford Coppola's beautiful Rumblefish.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, they try to kill themselves fighting their own reflection in the middle.
Yeah.
And Gus Van Sant's epic film Drugstore Cowboy, which is one of my all-time favorite movies.
And then I panicked when I looked out into the parking lot and I saw all those cop cars. Hell, I knew I was dead.
Dylan also had this to say about taking on the role of Marlon Brando in Being Maria, a film that not only looks at the controversy of Last Tango, but also the legacy of Marlon Brando.
I love Last Tango in Paris. I think it's a powerful film, and I think Bertolucci's a brilliant filmmaker. And Marlon Brando is, to me, one of the most interesting people of the 20th century. And that was an incredibly difficult thing, I think, for a 19-year-old to have been put through that in her first film. But they made it. What they did was, it was wrong what they did. I mean, talking about acting. And they're talking about it in a very real way, about finding the truth, right? And in a very misguided way. In a way, that's what they were doing in a funny way with Bertolucci, in their own way. So I'm very empathetic to what she went through, you know, in this film. And yet I still will always love Brando and Bertolucci, and I always love Last Tango in Paris, but I have a lot of empathy for what Maria went through.
Being Maria also comes hot off the heels of another actor I admire playing Marlon Brando in another true story from the actor's eventful life, and that is Billy Zane playing Brando in Waltzing with Brando.
Well, why did you go to the police? Why didn't you come to me first?
Cut.
Also a film that I greatly looked forward to, as Brando is a legend of cinema, and in my eyes, he will always be one of the very best actors of his or any other generation.
Don't you realize that you're thought of as the greatest actor ever?
Tim's the greatest actor ever. He pretends he loves me. He wants something to eat. Get out of here.
And it is also quite cool that these two actors I admire in Matt Dillon and Billy Zane are now forever entwined with Marlon Brando. Three actors that I've always enjoyed to watch.
I don't think that's really worth talking about.
So, all of this news about Brando and Last Tango in Paris got me thinking about Bertolucci's film, and I was looking through some old videos, and I thought I could share a very personal movie memory with all of you out there in the boneyard. So firstly, when I think about Last Tango, and over the years, I have quite often thought about it when designing for film or shooting my own movies, I have never immediately thought about those notorious scenes. When I saw the movie at a very young age, maybe 14 or so, I was blown away by the opening scenes of the film. And also the incredible, beautiful ending when we see that close-up of Brando's Paul when he sheds that final tear. Incredible moments of cinema that will be with me forever. And not by choice, but because of the impact these images had on me.
How do you like your hero? Over easy or sunny side up?
And controversy about the film or no, I don't think that could ever change the way that this movie makes me feel. It was always these moments, the opening and Paul's tears, that came to mind first. And at the age of 14, I was very impressionable, as all teenagers are, and I was discovering the work of artist Francis Bacon for the first time as well.
And sometimes when I've been working, I've been so disgusted with the thing, I'm so sick of it, that I just take the brush and put brush marks all over it, thinking, oh, this thing, I can't, it's not going to work at all. And then suddenly, out of this chaos, comes the possibility of making an image I hadn't thought of before.
And to see his work open up the movie was quite something, because in my young mind, I made a connection that whether paint, photography, or acting, it's all art, and it's all expression. And it was quite liberating for me at that time to see Bertolucci, a young artist himself, in his early 30s, putting another artist's work up on screen before his own, opening his movie with a sense of influence from Bacon's work, and giving us that context and tone of which to view Last Tango. It was mind-blowing to me. It wasn't homage, it wasn't copying or taking off someone else's work. It was using someone else's poetry to express something in yourself. And that was the first thing that I ever learned from Bertolucci. You can use someone else's poetry to express yourself, to create and show how you feel. Absolutely beautiful for a young film fan to discover.
I mean, I've used my bridge, for instance, very often. There is a painting I did of wrestlers, which comes out of my bridge. I put these wrestlers on a bed. Well, it's been called everything. It's been called the buggers. It's been called everything because I presumably, by putting it onto a bed rather than just leaving it on the ground, they thought it was more sexual. Why people shouldn't be just as sexual on the ground as on the bed would be hard to explain. But some people seem to think that the act of sex only takes place in a bed.
The featured works in the opening are two powerful paintings by Francis Bacon, double portrait of Lucien Freud and Frank Auerbach, and study of a portrait of Isabel Rawsthorne. The film's colour palette was actually inspired by Bacon's work. During pre-production, director Bernardo Bertolucci often visited a Francis Bacon exhibition at the Grand Palace in Paris. He found that the atmosphere in Bacon's paintings captured something really evocative about the city in wintertime. As Bertolucci put it, "The lights of the stores are on, and there is a very beautiful contrast between the leaden grey of the wintry sky and the warmth of the show windows. The light in the paintings was the major source of inspiration for the style that we were looking for." Bacon's art often portrayed human skin in a raw, visceral way, almost like meat in a butcher store window, and he drew inspiration from things like skin conditions and the texture of raw flesh, all quite harrowing and emotionally engaging things.
Yeah, many years ago, I happened to find a book in Paris on diseases of the mouth, and the colours were so beautiful that interested me, and I think that's very often the reason I did the scream. Sometimes now I do go into medical shops and buy books on skin diseases, but sometimes the colours are so beautiful that they suggest other ways of using colour on the skin. If you're going to decide to be a painter, then I think you've got to decide that you're not going to care if you make a real fool of yourself. Not to be afraid.
The cinematographer on Last Tango, Vittorio Storaro, who had previously worked with Bertolucci on the excellent The Conformist, was known for using cool tones, especially shades of blue and azure tones in his work. But for Last Tango in Paris, he shifted dramatically. Reflecting on it later, he said, "After The Conformist, I had a moment of crisis. I was asking myself, what can come after azure? I did not have the slightest idea that an orange film could be born. We needed another kind of emotion, and that was the case of Last Tango." So for Last Tango in Paris, Bertolucci and Storaro built a unique visual language inspired by Francis Bacon's colour sensibilities. Rich oranges,
I think I was telling you the truth.
Light and cool greys, icy whites, and occasional reds, blended with the director's own aesthetic choices of soft and warm browns, sandy blondes, and gentle white tones, tinged with blue and a kind of pink. Bertolucci even brought Marlon Brando to the Francis Bacon exhibition, hoping that the paintings would help Brando tap into something deeper in his performance. He told him, "I wanted him to compare himself with Bacon's human figures because I felt that, like them, Marlon's face and body were characterized by a strange and infernal plasticity. I wanted Paul to be like the figures that obsessively return in Bacon, faces eaten by something coming from the inside." Pretty strange words, but it also says a lot. Coming from the inside.
I think that when you talk about recording different levels, among other things you may be doing, is precisely expressing at one and the same time a love of the person being painted and a hostility towards them.
I love you. I want to know your name.
I think it goes to a deeper thing than this. I think it's how do I feel, and this can only be feeling, how can I make this image more immediately real to myself?
When reading all of this as a young film fan, I was learning something very important about film. Art inspires art, and artists inspire artists. Bertolucci often cited Jean-Luc Godard as one of his biggest inspirations. Godard famously recorded his feelings on cinema in one of his famous films, Le Petit Soldat, or in English, The Little Soldier in 1960.
La photographie, c'est la vérité. Et le cinéma, c'est 24 fois la vérité par seconde.
I'm sure that Bertolucci, when making Last Tango, was searching for this very same thing that had inspired him in Godard's work. Film is truth 24 times a second. And hearing him talk about Brando's truth in the movie years after having time to reflect on their collaboration is quite revealing, I think, about both the director's view of his own work, his personal stake in it, and the mystery of the great method actor Marlon Brando himself. Let's have a listen.
You know, if Marlon would have come with a devastated face, instead of putting a lot of makeup on his face, I would have managed to use this devastated face because that was in front of the camera and there is no makeup that can hide the truth to the camera because the camera always sees the truth. For the performance of Marlon in Last Tango, it's very much behind the mask of Marlon, behind the kind of actor studio mask that we have seen in all his movies. So I told him just 2 months ago, I met him again, and that I told that there was a lot of himself, and he smiled at me. You think that it was really me? But I know that it was him if he was lying.
Even if he was lying,
yeah,
it was.
It was, yeah.
After seeing Francis Bacon's work in the titles, I was then taken back by the awesomely powerful opening shot of Brando on the Pont de Biaquin bridge that crosses the River Seine in Paris, as he screams along with the sound of the passing elevated train that crosses atop the bridge. I still get goosebumps just thinking about it sometimes. And to this day, it is one of the most powerful opening scenes in movie history to me because of the impact that it had on me at that young age. This film became incredibly important to me, and I watched it countless times. And when I eventually became a film student, I began to study it at length, looking at the cinematography, especially that movement that Vittorio Storaro brings with such a swirling energy in that opening shot. What a way to start a movie. Pure energy. I was reminded of it a few years later with the running camera at the beginning of Mike Leigh's Naked, when the camera charges towards the action. It had that kind of kinetic, energetic feel for me as I watched. Very inspirational. I also fell in love with the incredible work of the late great production designer Ferdinando Scarfiotti, and I still study his work to this day because of Last Tango. Scarfiotti won the Oscar for working with Bertolucci again on The Last Emperor, which is an incredible looking movie.
I wish to dedicate this award to the memory of Bruce Weintraub, Alan Stern, and Kelly English, and a special thanks to Bernardo for his incredible faith in this project. And thank you all.
Scarfiotti also worked with my favorite filmmaker, Paul Schrader, as a production designer on American Gigolo and Cat People, two stunning films.
Being framed by somebody. I don't know who.
Scarfiotti is without doubt my favorite production designer. And in Last Tango, he gives us this gorgeous looking work that's sparse. It has a hidden beauty that is incredibly original still today. We see shapes and outlines of furniture, and we get the idea of a place, but yet it's almost the ghost of a building or the idea of an apartment. And even though the apartment looks empty, it is filled by Scarfiotti and Storaro with light and beauty that dances around the place. It gives us a feeling of grandeur, of history, light and depth, as if the very floorboards and windows themselves are characters and are alive with emotion during the movie. This movie taught me the importance of production design and how artists can use set, light, and place to not only enhance, but to tell the story itself in the very fabric of the materials and texture of the light. It's a work of incredible visual beauty, and I will never forget that opening scene on the bridge or that ending scene of Brando's face because of all of this wonder and beauty captured on screen by these amazing technicians and artists. As we bring this episode to a close, I thought I could share a movie memory with you all. Many years ago, I visited Paris for two distinct reasons. To visit the gravesite of my favorite singer, Jim Morrison, of the musical group The Doors, who died in Paris on July 3rd, 1971, and was buried along with many inspirational poets, musicians, and artists in Père Lachaise Cemetery. And the other, to stand on the bridge from the opening of Last Tango in Paris. Here's a few shots from that time in my life. Tell by that smile, I think, that I was a very happy boy when I visited the bridge at Pointe de Béarquin. Just to walk the paths that Brando walked was quite something. It was almost like a pilgrimage to visit the site of a movie that had affected me so deeply, and it's a pleasure to share that movie memory with you all out there in the Boneyard. It really was quite a big deal for this young film fan. Thanks for watching my take on Last Tango in Paris, much more than a movie to me, but a true inspiration. If you would like to hear more from me on the movies we love, remember to like, share, and subscribe, and please consider hitting that join button to become a Boneyard member for more personal content similar to this, including my own short movies and making of commentaries, or please consider joining the Boneyard as a Patreon supporter. You can also check out the store tab for new merch and clothing designs, and don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts on Last Tango's iconic opening shots and incredible movie-making design. It's your contribution that keeps me digging up classics right here in the Boneyard. Take care, everyone, and as always, thank you all so much for listening. Hey!